Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Chai Talk with Wajatli for the Left Hook Substack, where I invite a subject matter expert who's far smarter than me to break down some pertinent questions in 30 minutes or less. And today we have a MacArthur genius, yes, a certified genius, Cristina Jimenez, who is also now a best-selling author of the memoir that just dropped. Cristina, tell them the memoir.
Dreaming of Home, How We Turn Fear into Pride, Power, and Real Change, which is, so well suited in unfortunate ways for this time.
So, best-selling author, MacArthur Genius Fellow, leading immigration expert, and also co-founder of United We Dream, where young people are coming together to mobilize for immigrant rights and to share the stories that oftentimes are not shared in corporate media. And the timing of this is fantastic because in the hellscape that we live in, Christina, we actually have a little bit of good news. We're recording this at 3 p.m. and a federal judge just ordered the release of Mahmoud Khalil, the pro-Palestinian activist who has been held for several months in detention in Louisiana, has missed the birth of his child. His crime, it seems, is to be a pro-Palestinian activist. No due process, no criminal charges, and Marco Rubio, shameful Marco Rubio, a son of immigrants, has said, well, let me find this obscure little, nonsense and say because he's against the foreign policy directives of America, I, as a Secretary of State, can detain him. Regardless, a federal judge just ruled that Mahmoud Khalil has to go home. But I want to talk about that. But the framing of today, and it is really important because right before we hit record, I as a child of immigrants, um, I kept saying, to quote that famous Pastor Niemöller quote, first they came for, and then they came for, and then they came for. And when it was pro-Palestinian activists, meh. Transgender activists, meh. Undocumented activists, eh. Haitian immigrants, whatever. And then we saw Senator Padilla being tackled and arrested. Then we saw Brad Lander getting arrested, right? So the big question I have for you, because people don't connect the dots, is how is the Trump regime's attack on immigrants central to his authoritarian endgame? That's the big question I want to unpack with you. But first, some good news. Your thoughts on what we just learned about Mahmoud Khalil.
Well, I think we all should be celebrating this decision for Mahmoud and his family. And just a reminder for everyone who's engaged with us in this conversation that this is the power of organizing, the power of lawyers that are connected to activists and community that have been organizing every single day since he was unjustly detained and arrested and sent to a detention facility. This is what happens when we organize, even in these difficult times. And I think that what you were naming earlier is so relevant to the bigger framework and question that you're asking in this conversation, because when this started to happen, um, people wanted to disassociate
Mm,
with what was happening with international students. Certainly, Khalil being the first visible case, but then learning very quickly that this administration was going after international students, quite frankly, also green card holders.
yep.
And as we have seen now with immigration and the mass deportation um, tactics and the raids, is that it's truly a mass racial profiling project.
Yep.
Like your immigration status, your visa doesn't really matter. If you look like me, you're gonna be stopped,
It's
right?
the
Like if
Family
you
Guy
look,
chart. The Family
yeah,
Guy chart. White
yeah.
is okay, brown not so good.
If you are, and this is what it's also really creating a lot of attention in conversations in the Latinx community because, you have some people who supported this administration in the community, and many of them U.S. citizens, children of immigrants, um, who have themselves been arrested by these ICE agents while they're going to work. So I think what we are seeing, it's important to recognize as just straight out of the authoritarian playbook. Look, I've been with organizers that are organizing in the UK, in Brazil, in Poland.
Mm,
All of us are sharing the same observation. Authoritarians use trans people
mm.
and immigrants to divide us, to overreach power, and to grow their regime. And this is what we need to recognize, that this is less about an issue of legality. Come on. Now, US citizens, Native Americans are being stopped by ICE agents. This has never been about legality. Um, and so I think that what we're seeing right now is very dangerous. And I think all of us, quite frankly, even if you never thought about immigration as an issue that you were particularly, engaged in, but if you care about democracy, we have to pay attention to what's happening.
There's so much to talk about because this week alone, if we just take the DeLorean back 1 week, we have enough to unpack what's been happening on this issue for decades. So the xenophobia, the racism, Democrats and others punting the issue next election, next election, next election. People saying, oh, it doesn't bother me. Minorities, the model minorities who thought that their privilege would protect them, now realizing, whoopsie, it doesn't matter. They don't care. They don't differentiate between the undocumented and the legal. They don't care if you're a student at Columbia University or if you're a farmer picking fruits that we all eat. They don't care. This is a white supremacist project coming after everyone. And with that, I give you the unprecedented raids that are terrorizing LA. And talk to us about, you want to say authoritarian. People think, oh, she's being hyperbolic. I want to remind people that right before the election in October, I try to keep receipts, Cristina, Donald Trump quoted Hitler yet again. And he was the first president to threaten unleashing the National Guard and military against the American people, whom he called, quote, the enemy from within. You are in touch with the organizers in LA. There's another organizer and activist and writer, Jess Craven, who's from LA. She says, she compares it to the cities under terror. People are terrified, not just Latinos, like everyone. A non-problem became a problem because Stephen Miller unleashed masked ICE agents to terrorize workers at Home Depot. He wanted escalation. He got escalation. The LAPD, of all institutions, came out and said, nope, these are peaceful. We're good. They unleashed the National Guard, the military, and they even detained a black veteran who made the wrong turn going to Veteran Affairs. Talk to us about what's actually happening on the ground.
Well, one of the things that I would add to that great just naming of the facts here is that during the campaign trail, Trump told us this was one of his dreams. He told us during the
Signs.
campaign trail that he wanted to mobilize the National Guard and the military to fulfill his dreams of mass deportation. And LA, let's be real, it's very strategically chosen by this administration because they are, one of the cities with the largest number of immigrants, also largest number of undocumented people.
Mm.
Everyone in LA has a connection to an immigrant, whether it's a family member or neighbor. And what we're seeing in LA is the fulfillment of those promises of deploying the military, of deploying ICE agents. How much money from our own tax dollars is being used on a day-to-day basis to terrorize communities? I mean, they are going to car washes, they're going to parks to try to arrest nannies and care workers.
Mm.
They showed up at graduations. They showed up at a school trying to kidnap first graders, and they lied. They told teachers that they had received parent consent
Mm-hmm.
to talk to these first graders. I mean, this is a whole new level of terror. And what LA has showed us is that the communities, whether they're immigrants or not, because what you're seeing is whether you're an immigrant or not, these warlike
Yeah.
tactics
Yeah.
do not keep any community safe. And so what you're seeing is people, even business owners, right? Even business owners, faith leaders, everyday Americans are
Talk to us
coming
about the
out.
Dodgers.
Everyday Americans are coming out and saying no. And quite frankly, now everyone is being asked the question, including the Dodgers,
Yeah.
which side are you on?
There you go.
Are you going to be okay with, when you have ICE agents right outside this stadium, when the Dodgers are going to play? This is what's happening. And for all of those who are also thinking about the World Cup, it's the same
2026.
is the same. They are looking at all of the ways in which they can terrorize people. And so I think that this is, a big call. And this is why me as an organizer, I feel so hopeful because people are making the connection about where our money is going,
Hmm.
who's using our money, and who is siding with uh, our communities, who is siding against this administration, against the abuse of power, quite frankly, and in defense of our democracy. So, you see the Dodgers now being in a predicament after they told an amazing Mexican American singer, you cannot sing the anthem in Spanish. She had wanted to do at least a portion of it in Spanish. They get recorded saying you cannot absolutely do that, even though she expressed, this is my way to bring some support to the immigrant communities that are suffering in this moment. She does it anyway.
Yeah.
Then she gets a call saying, you will never be hired by the Dodgers again,
Mm.
ever. And now the community is paying attention. And also, eyes is showing up to the stadium. So the question for the Dodgers is, which side are you going to be on? You have generations of immigrants, Mexican Americans who are hardcore fans and, like the Dodgers, Home Depot, all of these different players now, which are also corporate players, are being asked the question of which side are you on? And I think that this is really important because all of this is connected to the money. Who gets to benefit from the immigrant labor? Who gets to benefit from the immigrants that say that they don't want, but you're okay with them buying tickets to go see the Dodgers, or you're okay going to get construction material from Home Depot. And at the same time, we're telling them that it's okay to terrorize them and to deport them en masse. And, quite frankly, the whole system is rooted in this contradiction of wanting to abuse immigrant labor, which we all benefit from,
Hmm.
and at the same time telling people that we're going to deport them in mass.
It's
Um,
go no, continue, please.
and so I think that, the one thing I will say is that, for all of those watching this, like the organizing is really working. The fact that the Dodgers are feeling the pressure to
Can you
now
tell them what
make
happened
statements.
yesterday? Can you tell people what happened?
Yes, so they feel the pressure to have to make a choice. And just yesterday, they announced that they are going to have an upcoming comprehensive set of offerings for how they're going to be supporting immigrant communities in this moment. Um, so, organizing works. I mean, this is the same thing that Black communities have been showing us with the boycotts on Target. And the way that all of these companies dropping, their equity policies need to also suffer the consequences of the consumer power that all of us hold. So, to me, I think that we are in a very dangerous time, but also in a very hopeful time in the sense that people are awakening, people are seeing the connections, and people are taking action.
To connect the dots, after Vance Bolter last weekend, a terrorist, a Trump voter, a Christian nationalist, had a list of 70 people, but unfortunately uh, killed two individuals, a representative and her husband, and also injured two others. After it was clearly proven that this man was a Republican Trump voter, Donald Trump, instead of acknowledging that or even calling Governor Walz, he said he's going to expand the reign of terror from beyond LA to other blue cities. Didn't mention Florida or Texas. I wonder why. So all those people who thought it'd be relegated to LA, think twice. And the Dodgers, who thought they could be safe, right? They bent the knee to placate the MAGA base, who was so upset that this Latina singer in LA, which has friggin' majority probably Latino population, dare sing this national anthem in Spanish. They thought, okay, by bending the knee and being tough on her, we'll win them over. And even then, I said, nope, we don't give a shit about you. We're going to come and, literally harass and terrorize your ticket holders. And then Los Angeles Dodgers, as an organization, was forced to make a capitalist decision that said, okay, wait, we can't stay neutral. I think that's a very good point, Christina. All the folks who thought they could be neutral, they're realizing in real time, nope, fascists come after everyone. They're knocking their fascist boots at your door and they're going to be at your neck. And this is where I have to be very fair and equal. We shit on the Republicans. We also then shit on Democrats. I'll praise people when they do right, But I'll criticize Democrats because Democrats for decades on immigration and on people of color have always tried to prove that they're tough on crime. So what do, Cristina? They punt on this issue and they double down and they copy the Republicans' talking points. And I'll remind people, because I keep the receipts, that it was Democrats in the House and Senate who helped the Republicans pass the Laken-Riley Act, which goes after those poor undocumented individuals who are simply charged with nonviolent offenses. Cristina, your message to the centrist establishment Democrats who have to this day refused to lead on this issue. I want to remind people, Senator Van Hollen, one senator. It was only one senator who went to El Salvador and got proof of life of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Cristina, it should have been 15. But if I'm out of pocket, if I think I'm being unfair, you let me know.
Well, and then just to follow on this, and then you had the party actually issuing guidance to all of the members of Congress that no one should go to El Salvador, that should stop.
Mm,
That was the guidance that, after Senator Holland went, that was the guidance that they received from the party. I have been doing this work for over 20 years. And in my trajectory of this work, and much of it advocating for policy reforms in Washington, D.C. and different states across the country, the truth is that Democrats have enabled the Republican agenda on this, from doing massive investments in this deportation force that has been unaccountable from day one. I mean, for those of us that may not know about the history, Border Patrol gets built to mirror the slave patrols
mm,
and the Texas Rangers. That's the history. You have you have KKK members that were some of the first members of Border Patrol when it was created back in the 1920s. And over time, both parties have worked together to increase resources, to increase abuse of power with no accountability. And so we are in this situation because both parties have been complicit. So, to me, I think that as much as we could criticize Republicans, I do think that for those of us that engage in democratic politics, we also have to be very critical of the Democratic Party and demand that they actually lean in on this issue. See, the answer here, which has been some of what they've been doing so far, is to hide from it, with very
yeah.
few exceptions. They are hiding from immigration and they're running away. They're ignoring the issue as if on its own it will somehow get resolved. Meanwhile, their opposition is growing in their authoritarian power and is prioritizing immigration as a tool to build more power. So, from a strategy standpoint, that makes no sense.
You
When
can't
your
escape it. You
opposition,
got to confront it.
yeah, when your opposition is using immigration to build more power and to divide your coalition, you cannot ignore this issue. So, to me, the way to lead and the opportunity that Democrats have is to really drive on the narrative, drive on the values and the vision of the party for a solution. I mean, this is an opportunity for us to help people and Democratic voters, to help them to see the connection that the opposition is using and Republicans are using this issue to divide us and put us to fight with one another and to distract us from the rich folks and the wealthy coming together with Republicans to concentrate power and make decisions that are impacting our lives. And that ultimately immigrants are not the ones that are responsible for the price of eggs or us not having healthcare, but that it is wealthy folks in coalition with Republicans. So if Democrats were being strategic,
Mm,
they will use this moment to
hmm
help their voters make that connection and make it really clear that this is the party of working class people over billionaires and over fascists that are trying to build more power. But instead, you see them running away from the issue, again, with very few exceptions. So, I think that for those of us who care about democratic politics, we have to keep on pushing.
Yeah, and not only run away, but repeat bad faith Republican talking points against the woke. against the Latinx, against immigrants, siding with Republicans to vote for the Lake and Riley Act, right? Staying mum as they went after pro-Palestinian activists because they were afraid what would AIPAC say, right? Even though Mahmoud Khalil and Rameza Ostrich and all these individuals literally were detained folks without any due process or any criminal charges. And then what did they do? They went after 238 brown men right here, in the near the DMV, and they picked them up and literally renditioned them to a friggin' El Salvador prison where they're still at without any due process, suffering perhaps forever, right? And thankfully, it took a Senator Van Hollen to at least normalize and mainstream one story. The story is important, right? That humanizing story of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, it was forced to be in the news, folks, and now that is an albatross around the neck of Republicans. Donald Trump is negative 19 on that issue alone. So that tells me, Cristina, if you actually fight based on your values, if you fight based on convictions, if you message, if you tell the story, you can actually turn people around. Voila, I gave you Kilmar Abrego Garcia, right? It was a non-story. Van Hollen put it front and center. And because Van Hollen went, folks, people forget, it gave courage to about 8 Democrats, including Senator Merkley and I think also Ayanna Pressley, who then went to the Louisiana Detention Center and
Yes.
visited Mahmoud Khalil and Rameza Ostrich.
Well, and that has also sparked all these congressional delegations that are going to exercise their right and their duty to to do oversight of many of these detention facilities. And now what you're seeing is the administration also limiting their ability to fulfill their role as members of Congress for oversight. So this is why, I think it's important that this is not just about the international students, quite frankly, immigrants. Beyond that, what you're seeing is how this administration is testing us
Yep.
and testing our institutions and testing to see how much the public will allow for him to intimidate and shut down people that disagree with this administration.
And I always want to connect the dots for folks. Sorry, Christine, you wanted to say something. Go ahead.
And I mean, and this is the connection. This is about First Amendment rights. And anyone, like if they're going after US citizens who are brown and black, and they are going after Native Americans, and they are going after immigrants with legal status because they disagree with what they're saying, they are going to do the same increasingly with more of us. So for those of us, again, that care about our constitutional rights, that care about democracy, this we have to sound the alarm.
And just to give specific examples to what you're saying, this week provided it. You mentioned the World Cup 2028, 2026, Olympics 2028. Folks, people are not coming to America right now. Tourism has dropped. We have lost $12 billion of revenue. In addition to all the horrific news of ICE agents terrorizing, literally the city of LA, going after Senator Padilla, going after the city comptroller, Brad Lander. We also found out that the Trump administration, as of this week, is going to go after foreign students and do screening, right? And if, God forbid, there's social media that they don't like, they're going to get kicked out. We also found out, as a result of the Trump administration cutting National Institute of Health, right? Cutting cancer research, right? Cutting all these scientists and going after universities. Not only is there a brain drain, China and Japan and Europe are poaching these students and scientists who used to come to America, these brilliant immigrants. And then we found out this week, Cristina, is that the original Muslim ban, let's be honest, it was the Muslim ban, which then got called the travel ban. Surprise, surprise, folks. They just unleashed an expanded version of the travel ban. Now it's not just Muslim majority countries, it's all these Central American countries and African countries. So it impacts all of us. A question that people, the connecting the dots that people don't understand, and I hate talking like this, but the color that trumps all in America, and you've alluded to it, is the color green. Can you please set the record straight of how immigrants help the economy, and what Trump is doing right now is essentially the murder-suicide of the American economy with his attack on immigrants?
I mean, immigrants contribute to the economy in the billions of dollars. And that it's not even me naming the over $30 million every year on Social Security and benefits that immigrants pay for that they do not even get to benefit from. And now you're also hearing, right, the administration wanting to make cuts to Social Security, to Medicare, Medicaid. So the connecting of the dots here is that somehow we are being told this story that we are going after dangerous immigrants, in completely invisibilizing that immigrants are like anybody else and everybody else in this country, working, trying to do their best for their families and loved ones. And that particularly in agriculture, in the hotel industry, in the service industry, and the construction industry, they are the backbone and overrepresent the workforce in those industries. So if, for all of those people that believe in this administration lowering prices of food, guess what, folks? Like there's already in the news how much we are suffering because of the raids that are happening in the fields of California and in major distribution points of California of produce that are going rotten
Mm-hmm.
because workers have been raided and people cannot do the work. So for people that were worried about food prices and thought, oh, Trump is going to bring a better, better prices, better economy for me, absolutely not. This what we are doing is destroying the economy. It is also turning a whole bunch of workers, thousands and thousands of workers that, by the way, had legal status, that with a whole bunch of their executive orders have now become undocumented. To then what? Deport them to El Salvador or some other country or Guantanamo Bay. So this whole strategy is actually not going to keep anybody safe. It's not going to make the economy better. For anyone that really drank the Kool-Aid on that, let's connect the dots. Not having farm workers being able to do their job is actually going to create shortage issues, and is also going to be is going to increase prices of food. So, that's just any example in the farm and in with the farm working industry and the agriculture industry, but the chain, it's all over in construction, in the hotel industry. And I don't know if folks have seen in the news recently, but a lot more mid-size business owners of construction companies are coming out, sharing their stories. Many of them Trump voters in places like Florida and Texas saying, we are losing our entire workforce to rates. I did not vote for this. This is not what I voted for. And now they're upset, right? But so to me, this administration is really exposing itself. And I think the opportunity that we have is to organize folks that are awakening to what many of us saw coming.
Yeah, let me ask you two more questions. Following up on that, it was disheartening to see in many of our communities of color, a lot of folks sided with Trump this time around. Majority of Latinas went for Kamala Harris. Majority of Muslims and Arabs went for Kamala Harris, but still there was a shift towards Trump. And what do you say then to those, especially Latin men, who voted for Trump? I think sadly it was a slight majority. Like, how do you win them back? And is it like told you so? I always think capture and convert is better. But these are your community members. You know them. I know them in my communities. The major reason I always tell people was, I joke, gays in Gaza. That's what did it. Gays in Gaza. Fear of gay folks. The anti-transgender, fear mongering that got so many suburban voters, and also anger over Gaza. How do you win over those Latinos who now are realizing, oh shit, they hate all of us?
I mean, some of them have gotten detained already, right?
Mm.
Some Trump voters have been arrested by ICE. Um, U.S. citizens. But again, why? Because they were racially profiled. And now people are waking up to the white supremacist agenda of this administration. I will say that it's important to take a little bit of a step back and understand like why these voters voted the way that they did.
Please.
The way in which the Republican Party and the MAGA movement has invested in speaking to those communities, not from a place of elite language and very intellectualized conversations, but from a place of understanding their pain and their fears and their struggles. And that's how they've been recruiting. And they've been recruiting people through social media, through what people consume on Facebook and other social media platforms. So this is a long time coming in terms of the investment that they have done versus you look at how the Democratic Party has actually not invested in meaningful ways in
Yeah.
engaging with these communities. So, there's a lot of disinformation and misinformation, but also they did the homework to
Mm,
understand the pinpoints and the dreams of this community. I have, I know in my community, young men who I love that ended up voting for Trump.
mm,
Children of immigrants, some of them even children of undocumented immigrants that I
mm.
know. Why? Because they believed in this lie that they get fed in the content that they're consuming, that if they vote for someone like Donald Trump, they get to be as successful entrepreneur as he is, or they'll get to have um, money and popularity and power. And you know what? If you understand the Latino community and machismo and
Mm.
patriarchy, you will know that this is a way to get to the men in the community. And so they did their homework. And that's how they were over time building a connection with this constituency of men who saw them, who saw him in particular as the answer to perhaps not having a good job, and or struggling financially to sustain their families, and seeing this administration as a potential path for economic prosperity and opportunity, which for people that come from Latin America, you could be second, third, fourth generation. You know your family came here fleeing either poverty, dictatorships, persecution, and seeking opportunity.
Yeah.
So this is a community that in their DNA, they're seeking for that opportunity. And the MAGA movement and and Trump as a candidate offer that. So I think that the way that we move forward now, especially as people are, I was just in Miami in the book tour, as I've been getting the story out, which for me, it's my story of growing up undocumented, but also the story of how we, as everyday Americans, can create strong movements that can bring change. And that was the immigrant youth movement that I was part of building up during the Obama years, and how we were able to win the Deferred Action for Child Arrivals program in 2012. And as I'm sharing this story, a lot of Latinos showed up to this event in Miami, many of them who have voted for Trump, and now they're telling me they feel betrayed.
Mm.
They want a way to get involved to change what they're seeing. And, very easily, I think that we can be from a place of anger and say, I told you so. But that's not the way that we're going to be able to engage these folks. The reality is that their decisions come from a place of pain
Mm.
and suffering financially and seeing no opportunity. And so I do think that the best way to organize them is, okay, you see the things that we saw, that we've been seeing for some time, join us now. And we welcome you in to have these conversations and to understand why things are happening the way that they're happening. Why is it that we can have a refugee program for why South Africans and deny refugee and asylee status to Black and Brown immigrants?
Yeah.
So those kinds of conversations is the way that we're going to be able to organize people. And I feel really hopeful that this is an opportunity of awakening and bringing people in to ultimately show whose interests matter the most. And that is, everyday Americans' interests matter most than billionaires and than the, you know, Trump-like leaders that want to build power for themselves.
The 99% versus the 1%. Final quick question. I think a way forward, and I don't know if you agree with me, is for at least Democrats to finally get on board and say, abolish ICE. Because I'm old enough to remember that ICE did not exist in the 20th century. ICE was created during the failed war on terror. And if you can get rid of the Department of Education, and if you could get rid of US aid, I don't think we need the modern Gestapo masked agents terrorizing communities. But that's just me. Christina, you're the MacArthur genius. What do you say?
I think that what Democrats are totally missing, and this is before Kamala Harris, but also Kamala Harris and Democrats now, is that they are lacking a narrative and a story for why immigrants and immigration is good for this country.
Yep.
We're still operating under what the right wing has built for us. And that's basically a dominant narrative that immigrants and immigration are bad. And somehow Democrats feel like they need to continue to play within this box, when actually we need to get out of that box. If I was providing advice to the Democratic Party, the solution here is to articulate a proactive vision that resonates with our values as a country that has aspirational values of equity and justice and opportunity for all. But that also applies to how we think about immigrants and immigration. That the reality is that the system that we have is not working by design. It's hurting people, hurting our economy by design. And that we need overall a system that allows people who are already here to have a pathway to citizenship, and for us to also have a system that allows people to come and go legally.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people think that immigrants want to come and stay here. The reality is that our economic pools do attract temporary workers, but we do not have a system that allows for people to come work with their rights honored and good wages honored and go back home. We don't have a system that meets the globalized conditions, the climate change conditions that we have. And I think Democrats have a huge opportunity to be able to put forward a vision that, is not just about saying this kind of lawlessness of ICE and Border Patrol is not working, but to actually give us a picture and a vision for what a system that manages migration rooted in justice and rooted in democratic values can actually look like.
This is the challenge, and it's an opportunity. Democrats, if you're listening, step up. Create that vision of hope, that vision that includes immigrants, because, folks, immigrants ain't going nowhere. Without immigrants, America is destroyed. So we're here, and we're going to stay here. And thank you so much to Cristina Jimenez. She is the best-selling author of Dreaming of Home, How We Turn Fear into Pride, Power, and Real Change. I'll link to it. She's also MacArthur genius, co-founder of United We Dream, and a leading immigration expert. Folks, thank you for joining The Left Hook. Consider becoming a subscriber. Everything is free, no paywalls. But if you can't, I get it. At least spread the good word. Become paying subscriber if you can. If not, share the story. Be kind, be empathetic, and please, oh, please don't be a fascist. Thank you, Cristina.